Whatever happened to Janice Rand, Kevin Riley, and Dr. Mabenga? This is episode 54.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casto, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
Star Trek had a large regular cast for its time, but it also had a group of characters that made more than one appearance and then sometimes just disappeared. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casto. We're going to talk about some of those recurring characters this week. But before we do, let's tell everyone how they can reach us.
Good idea. Just visit our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/70strek. And you can also send us an email to 70strek@gmail.com.
And you can find the show on iTunes. Just search 70s Trek in the podcast section. And if you will, please leave a rating or a review on iTunes. It helps other Trek fans find the show.
There are several characters that appear a few times in Star Trek and then just disappear.
Yeah, there are also some faces that you see again and again, but we never get to know who they are.
Well, this weekend next, we're going to talk about a few of these people, and let's start with a character that only showed up in the first season, but boy, when he did, he impacted the action.
Absolutely. So Lieutenant Kevin Thomas Riley, played by Bruce Hyde. Now, he's one of my actual favorite characters that are these peripheral characters.
Yeah, me too. I always liked Riley.
I did too. And it turns out he has a bit of an interesting life too after Star Trek. But let me start kind of at the beginning with Bruce. Bruce was born September 14th, 1941. He had really only 8 acting credits. Most of those are for TV or TV movie, and one is for a movie in 2010, Confessions of Lee Harvey Oswald.
So wait a minute. So he only had 8, and I'm guessing those were primarily in the 60s. But then he's got one in 2010.
Yeah, it's kind of odd.
Wow.
So in the 60s, primarily 65 and 66 is when he did all his TV work. Started with The Trials of O'Brien in 65, Dr. Kildare, 66. He was on 4 episodes, so he had a reoccurring role. Vacation Playhouse, 1966, 1 episode. Obviously, we know him from Star Trek in 1966 as well. He had 2 episodes, which I'll get to that here in a second. 1966, he also was in That Girl for an episode, The Beverly Hillbillies for 1 episode, all those in 1966. The Recruiters, which is a TV movie in 1966.
I don't know why, but I could see him. I'm not saying I remember him, but I could see him in That Girl, that kind of wacky comedy sense of humor. I could see him in that doing really well.
Yes. Well, and what kind of endeared me to this character was on The Naked Time.
Oh, absolutely.
We all know him singing, I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen. And just, that was
One
so awesome.
more time. And Kirk's face. Oh, please, no.
Yes. So, love that. And I don't know if we want to get into what he did on Conscious of the King.
Well, yeah, he was the other witness to...
he was, right.
Right.
He and Kirk were the last ones left.
Yep.
So after, though, Star Trek and his TV acting, he went to San Francisco and he was in Hair, the musical, for about a year. Now, Bruce was interviewed for StarTrek.com, And he said this, and love this. After a year of playing a hippie on stage, I decided that I wanted to stay in San Francisco and play one for real.
Really? So he kind of hippied out.
Yeah, he did. So I dropped out of acting, and I lived in San Francisco for 10 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So while he was a hippie, he had to make ends meet, so he became a house painter, and eventually led to a role as a personnel manager for this large house painting company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now we didn't talk about this, but in 1963, he earned his BA at Northwestern University. And while he's in San Francisco, this helped him obviously get a substitute teaching certificate there. And he did some substitute teaching work, which also included at least directing one high school musical. He might have done more, but I could only find a reference to one.
Wow.
Yeah. Also, he tried his hand at music while he's in San Francisco. And he wasn't bad from everything I've read. He did a pretty good job. But he decided that the music industry just wasn't meant for him. So he moved back to Texas. There, he got his master's at the University of North Texas in 1984. He went on to get a PhD in rhetoric/communication studies at the University of South California in 1990.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, then he moved to St. Cloud, Minnesota area, where he became the chair of the Theater, Film Studies, and Dance Department at St. Cloud State University.
So he ends up kind of going back to acting, just in a different form.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Now, he did some acting there locally and, on the university. He said in another interview, and I'm just paraphrasing, that this was the best job he'd ever had, being a tenured professor at the university. He loved it. And he loved being with the students and everything.
That's neat. How many students do you think went up to him and said, "You're Kevin Riley"?
Or say, "Can you sing?"
Yeah,
I'll take you home again, Kathleen. He got that all the time from what I read.
That's
too,
funny.
Which was funny. Now, he had to quit the acting, community acting thing due to throat cancer in 2010, which he got through that and went into remission. But then January 2015, it came back and he died October 13th of 2015.
Wow, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. He was one of my favorite recurring characters as well. Well, I took a look at Booker Bradshaw, who played Dr. Mabenga. He appeared in 2 episodes of Star Trek, A Private Little War, which aired in February 1968, and the episode That Which Survives, which aired in January 1969. So just kind of notice those dates there. There's almost a whole year between this character's appearances.
Yeah.
Bradshaw attended Harvard. In 1961, he appeared on a show called The Original Amateur Hour. And I think this was like an America's Got Talent kind of show. And he ended up winning it 3 times.
3?
Yeah. And in fact, Booker Bradshaw goes on to perform at Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
Right. He also earned a full scholarship to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. So Booker Bradshaw had quite the resume before he ever stepped on a soundstage in Hollywood. Now, you'll love this. He also worked at Motown Records. And he worked with the Supremes and the Temptations when they toured Europe, sort of helping them get through whatever they needed to get through, that kind of thing. Before he appeared on Star Trek, he was in Here's Lucy and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E. If you remember, that was a spinoff of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He has just 21 acting credits, Mr. Bradshaw does, and nearly as many writing credits, 17. And he wrote for shows after Star Trek, like The Planet of the Apes and Columbo. Booker Bradshaw, very, very interesting guy. A little background on the character of Dr. M'Benga. The character was originally created by writer Darlene Hartman. She had submitted a script to Star Trek called Shoal, S-H-O-L. While Roddenberry bought the script, it was never produced. But somehow that name, M'Benga, got into other writers' heads because it started popping up in other scripts. And it does pop up in an early version for Obsession, a season 2 episode. And that episode, ironically, was produced just a week or so after A Private Little War, which was M'Benga's first appearance. After Star Trek, Booker guested on shows like Julia, The FBI, The Mod Squad, and in the 80s, he voiced several Saturday morning cartoons. And he passed away in 2003 from a heart attack.
Wow.
Well, you looked at Mr. Kyle, right?
Yes. So Lieutenant Kyle, played by John Winston. John's an English actor. He was born in October 24th, 1933. Had a total of 15 acting credits.
15?
15, yeah.
Wow.
Now, most of these, again, are TV series or TV movies. There was a couple movies, and I'll get into those here in a second. One of them is important. So he started really TV acting, from what I could tell, in 1966. Started with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., 12 O'Clock High in 1966, Time Tunnel 1966. I believe it was in the pilot episode of that Time Tunnel.
Wow.
He was in Star Trek. 11 episodes total Star Trek from 67 to 69. He was the transporter chief for several episodes, but he also was a helmsman on the bridge. Yes. Now, I don't remember any speaking parts for Lieutenant Kyle.
For Lieutenant Kyle?
Yeah.
He does. He does have some speaking parts. The one I remember the most is in the transporter room. The episode is Return to Tomorrow, and where he accidentally beams up the Air Force sergeant.
Yes.
And the Air Force sergeant's a little confused about where he is and what's going on, and Lieutenant Kyle kind of helps him, and would you like to have some soup? And
that's right.
Which I always thought was kind of a funny thing.
All right. Then he moved on from Star Trek, and he was in a TV movie called Soul Survivor in 1970. Now, this also starred William Shatner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Next, he was in another TV movie, Assault on the Wayne. I never saw this one. In 1971, and that starred Leonard Nimoy.
Nice.
So, kept some roots there. Went back to TV with The Evil Touch, 74, Charlie's Angel, 1978, and these are all one episodes. The Fall Guy, 1982, Max Headroom.
Oh, wow.
1987. And he was a decent character, or had a decent role in Lucky Chances, which is a mini-series in 1990. Now, movie-wise, he was in a couple major movies. California Split in 1974. And, of course, he was in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, in 82. Reprising his role as Lieutenant Kyle, or probably wasn't a lieutenant. He was communications officer on the Reliant.
I do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, he looked different, though.
Well, he had a goatee.
He had a goatee, right. He was also, and this is the last acting credit that I have for him, he was in Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2. This was in 2004. Now, he didn't play the character Kyle, but he played, and this was in the pilot episode, Come What May, Captain Jeffries.
Nice.
Kind of interesting here, and we'll get to this person in a second, but it also had Eddie Paskey in this episode.
Oh, yeah. So, don't say anything more. Now, did Mr. Kyle, John Winston, appear in any other Star Trek films?
He did not.
So,
It was
Mr. Kyle,
just Star Trek 2.
Star Trek 2. Well, okay, what am I thinking? He can't, can he? Because of what happened to the Reliant crew.
Right.
Oh,
right.
Heck, I wasn't even thinking when I asked that.
But you'd think he could be in the motion picture.
You're right. You would think he might have been.
But, well, maybe he was on the Reliant at the time.
Maybe.
One more thing. He's still alive in North Hollywood, but there is a Facebook page called Put John Winston in the Sci-Fi Hall of Fame.
Oh, really?
So look it up. It doesn't talk much about that anymore, but there's current postings in the Facebook page, and they're just talking Star Trek.
Oh, wow. That's really neat. I like stuff like that.
Yeah, I did too. I spent too much time reading on that site.
Well, let me tell you about Bilie Blackburn. Bilie Blackburn was an uncredited extra throughout most of his acting career, appearing in the background of movies like Spartacus, Snow White and the Three Stooges, and he actually was Ray Walston's stand-in on the show My Favorite Martian. And it was actually that job that got him a gig on Star Trek. On My Favorite Martian, he met assistant director Tiger Shapiro. And we're not sure exactly what happened, but somehow Shapiro owed Bilie a favor, and that favor was paid off by him getting his next job on Star Trek. When he was hired to be the stand-in for DeForest Kelley. You know what a stand-in does when the scene is over and the actors go off to their trailers or wherever to learn more lines. I said lions. Lines. The stand-ins, my goodness. The stand-ins come into the stage and the crew will light the stand-in rather than the actor standing there as well. So that was Billy's first role on Star Trek. However, that changed down the road a little bit. He did appear in 75 episodes of the original 79. In some episodes, he played more than one background character in the same show as well. In Shore Leave, Bilie was the White Rabbit. In Arena, he was the Gorn in the Close-Ups. He played an Organian villager in Errand of Mercy. He was the robot constructed by Enoch in Return to Tomorrow. He was one of Harry Mudd's androids in I, Mudd. He was in the Apple as one of the people of Vol. We love the people of Vol here. And he was a NASA technician in Assignment Earth. And he was also a god. He played the voice of Trelane's father. I should say he offered his voice as Trelane's father in The Squire of Gothos.
Okay.
But it was while the Galileo 7 was in production that first assistant director, Tiger Shapiro, needed someone to sit at the navigator station on the bridge. And he said, "Hey, Bilie, come here. Go get a uniform on and sit right there." And in that episode, there's a nice wide shot, and then the camera at one point sweeps in past the navigator, moves into Kirk, and there's Bilie. And that sort of started him being a regular in the navigator seat until Chekhov came into the show in the second season. But when Chekhov couldn't be there, Bilie would go back and sit in the navigator's chair. So he spent a lot of time on the bridge. One of the other things that he did was bring his Super 8 movie camera to work. And he recorded hours and hours of movies. And after Star Trek was canceled, he pretty much just sort of packed them away in a box. And at some point, he actually put them in a safe deposit box. And so these movies weren't touched for 35, 40, oh my God, coming up on 50 years, actually. And in 2007, as Star Trek was being remastered and redigitized for the Blu-ray edition, Paramount said, hey, would you be okay with letting us use some of this stuff? And as they began to look at it, it was like, holy cow, this is the missing behind-the-scenes stuff, that most shows have that Star Trek hasn't. And so, they made an arrangement with Bilie to use this footage, and Bilie was interviewed for the Blu-ray set, and a lot of the stuff that he has is incredible. If you don't own Star Trek, the special edition, the Blu-ray remastered version, it's worth it just for the behind-the-scenes movies that Bilie Blackburn shot. Really, really good stuff. Have you ever seen that stuff?
I've seen some of it. Yeah, I haven't gone through all of the special features, but wow,
neat
Thank
stuff.
you, Bilie.
Yeah, seriously, it's a great document of what was going on behind the scenes there during the production. After Star Trek, Bilie became a costumer, and he actually was the key costumer on Night Court in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
He never really appeared at any conventions until finally in 2007, as the Star Trek remastered, edition was coming out and the stuff with his films were coming out, that he decided to go to his first convention. Can you imagine that?
No.
Being so associated with the show. You were in 75 of 79 episodes, and he never showed up at a convention. Go figure. That's Bilie Blackburn.
All right. Well, let's talk about Mr. Leslie, played by Eddie Paskey. Eddie was born August 20th, 1939. He had 6 acting credits, or has 6 acting credits, I should say. 5 out of 6 were done in the 60s. So I'll just run through those real quick. Ben Casey was his first acting gig. Then went on to Gomer Pyle, USMC, Dick Van Dyke Show, and then 3 episodes of Mission Impossible, including the pilot. Star Trek, he was in 60 episodes. He was also Shatner's stand-in, and that's how he got onto the show. And he was his stand-in for 62 episodes. But that led him to the job, as Mr. Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as Mr. Leslie, actually, as his character, he was usually a red shirt, but there were a few occasions he had a blue shirt on. And one of those occasions was the second pilot. He was on a character in the second pilot. He had a blue security shirt on the planet for Where No Man Has Gone Before. So you'll see him a couple times in that episode. He also played a different character. Let's see. So in Mud's Women, Dr. McCoy refers to him as Connors. Now, this was before he was actually given an official name of Mr. Leslie. He also played several other characters like Bilie did. He was a German soldier with a mustache. In a piece of the action, he also was one of the people firing a machine gun in that episode. And he was the guy driving the truck that ran over Joan Collins' character, Edith Keeler.
Oh, you're kidding.
In The City on the Edge of Forever.
Eddie.
Forever changing history.
Wow.
Or putting it back, I guess. Couple interesting things. He technically was a red shirt that never died, but in the episode Obsession, he actually did die by the gaseous cloud creature on the surface, along with 3 other characters. Now, the script for that episode didn't have them die, had them going back to the bridge, or not the bridge, the Enterprise, and getting revived. But later in that episode, you see him up on the bridge. So he's back alive. So who knows why they cut that out. But that was part of the original intent of that script. So he technically did die, but he didn't.
So I have a couple of Eddie Paskey memories I just want to share real quick. In The Naked Time, when everybody's starting to get drunk from, the perspiration past whatever it is, there's a scene as the Enterprise is beginning to spiral into that planet where Eddie Paskey's character is in the helmsman's seat, and he's just there's just this really bad giggle going on by him. And Kirk's got to kind of scoop him up out of the chair and get him out of the way. But I just remember it was a horrible, ridiculous laugh. It's clearly fake, and unfortunately, the poor guy didn't sell it very well.
Yeah.
And then
he had 4 episodes where he had scripted lines.
Did he?
And one of my favorite, and I remember this distinctly, was This Side of Paradise. So, the entire crew of the Enterprise is infected by the flower spores. And the crew is all lined up at the transporter room to beam down to the planet to start their new life, on the planet, this spore-induced bliss or whatever. Mm-hmm. Captain Kirk is confronting them. And after saying to him multiple times, get back to your station, Leslie steps out and says, "I'm sorry, sir, but we're all going down to join the colony." And Kirk says, or demands really, that they return to their station. And Leslie shakes his head. He says, "No, sir."
Right.
Kirk replies, "This is mutiny, mister." And Leslie answers with a grin, "Yes, sir, it is."
We should have never seen him again just because of that.
Right.
There's a scene in And the Children Shall Lead where he is a security officer on the bridge standing at the turbolift doors, and the kids are messing with Kirk, and they're causing Kirk to talk backwards. And he's talking to Leslie. He's trying to get Mr. Leslie to go over there and grab these kids and arrest them. And of course, it's coming out. But Leslie, instead of having a look on his face like I don't understand he's got this hard ass look on his face like, "I'm going to kick your ass, Captain," the whole time.
It's so funny.
It is. It's funny.
Yeah. But so he actually got to sit in the captain's chair twice.
He did.
Squire Agathos and the Alternative Factor. Everybody was away from the bridge on an away mission or whatever. But he actually got to sit in the captain's chair.
Oh, that's neat.
Now, if you get a chance, go to YouTube and look up a video, and I forget exactly what it's called, but it's a tribute to Mr. Leslie. And
nice.
I watched that about 5 times.
Nice.
It was awesome.
I did find, not to interrupt you, I did find a still from behind the scenes when they were filming Devil in the Dark, and it's Kirk, it's William Shatner, Billy Blackburn, and Eddie Paskey together. It was a cool picture of the three of them.
So Kirk or Shatner actually named Mr. Leslie. I don't know if you knew this.
I didn't know that.
He's Paskey sitting at Sulu's position on the bridge, and Shatner's trying to tell him, "Hey, let's leave orbit," but he doesn't have a name, and he's like, so Shatner stands up and says, "Hey, we gotta call him. We gotta give him a name.
Yeah, we can't just say, 'Hey, you.'"
Right? That's what he said. "I can't just say, 'Hey, you.'" And he goes, "Let's call him Leslie after my daughter." So there you go. Lieutenant Leslie was born. Now, in Eddie, he says about his longevity on the series, and I thought this was classic. "Very careful to be somewhere else when the script called for someone to die. Because I was on the set all the time. I knew what was in the script. I didn't want something to happen to my character because that would have put me out of the show. So he basically, dodged and weaved on the set.
That's great.
He did Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2. He was Admiral Leslie.
Nice.
So he was married to Judy Paskey, and they had 4 kids. And they ended up owning an automobile, air conditioning, and accessory shop in Santa Ana, California. They called it the Air Shop. Now, they sold the business in 2004, but he was a car guy. He had, I guess, grown up, his dad had an automobile repair shop, and so he worked in the shop all the time, got to know cars inside and out, loved hot rods. And so it was just kind of natural that he'd fall into, some kind of an automobile shop. He and his wife were long members of Hot Rods Unlimited in Southern California. So there you go.
Next week, we continue with part 2 of this episode as we try to figure out what happened to Yeoman Rand.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.